On January 26, 1935, a young boy was playing near Jackass Hill, a crime-ridden area in Cleveland, when he spotted something in the brush. He headed over to confirm his suspicions and found a lifeless, mutilated body. If you're into true crime, make sure to hit the sub button and the notification bell. Thank you and enjoy. The body found was that of Florence Polillo, a tragic victim of the Cleveland torso murderer, and one of the first of many in the Kingsbury Run area of Cleveland, Ohio. Her horrifying murder marked a chilling chapter in the series of killings attributed to the elusive and unidentified torso murderer. On September 5, 1934, the first victim, an unidentified woman in her 30s, was found on the shores of Lake Erie. All that was found was part of her torso, thighs, and other body parts. But no head. Her skin was leathery and red from a chemical preservative. This marked the beginning of the murders. We know little to nothing about who this woman was due to her mutilated state. On September 23, 1935, the second victim, a 28-year-old man named Edward Andrassy, was found near Kingsbury Run at the base of Jackass Hill. Andrassy was a regular around the Roaring Third. Edward Andrassy, like many of the torso murderer's victims, lived on the fringes of society. He was a 28-year-old drifter with a troubled past, which unfortunately made him a vulnerable target for the elusive killer. Andrassy's life came to a brutal end on September 23, 1935, when his headless and mutilated body was discovered in Kingsbury Run. The discovery of Andrassy's remains followed the gruesome pattern established by the torso murderer. His head was severed, and the dismemberment appeared to be carried out with a degree of precision, suggesting knowledge of anatomy. The body parts were arranged deliberately, adding a horrifying and ritualistic aspect to the crime. The same day, an unidentified 40-year-old male was also decapitated. The body also had the same chemical preservative from the first killing. The next victim was Florence Polillo. Her head was found wrapped up in newspaper inside half-bushel baskets. She was a waitress and a sex worker around the city. The serial killer was responsible for up to 20 murders around the area, most of the victims being unrecognizable after his evil work. Over the next few years, the torso murderer continued his spree, targeting individuals from vulnerable populations, hobos, drifters, and the marginalized. The victims were often decapitated and dismembered, with their bodies left strategically placed in the Kingsbury Run area, an impoverished and crime-ridden neighborhood. The killings seemingly ceased in 1938, but the true identity of the torso murderer remained unknown. Authorities struggled to make connections between the victims, and the killer left little evidence behind. Director Ness and 35 detectives and police officers went into Kingsbury Run's hobo jungle. They gathered 63 men and looked in the shacks for any sign of the killer. In a move that has been criticized, Ness then ordered the shacks to be burnt down. The people displaced were then charged with being homeless, which they plead guilty for. Ness's part in this investigation has been referred to as cruel and disgusting. There is a lot of conspiracy and theories around this case, as there is every cold case. Dr. Sweeney was a former physician with a history of mental illness. He was suspected due to his knowledge of anatomy and alleged connections to the victims. Some investigators believe that Sweeney was the torso murderer, driven by his troubled mental state and possible grudges against specific demographics. Dr. Francis E. Sweeney fit the description. He was a doctor and would have had the skill and knowledge to perform the killings. Sweeney had also been court multiple times, and his wife noted his problems with alcoholism, his abuse of her and their 2 sons, his days-long disappearances, and his neglect of his practice. After the final murder, Sweeney checked himself into a mental institution, after which the killings stopped. Frank Dolezal was a bootlegger and criminal associate in Cleveland during the 1930s. Some theories suggest that Dolezal may have been involved in the murders, possibly as a hired hitman or as part of criminal activities. However, evidence linking him to the crimes is speculative due to the precision behind the mutilations. Dolezal had lived with Polillo, one of the victims, for a while. Dolezal also knew victims Edward Andrassy and Rose Wallace. Following his arrest, Frank Dolezal confessed to murdering Florence Polillo. However, he later said he had been beaten and took back his confession. But of course, all of these theories are just speculation. Let me know if you guys have any crime or story requests, and as always, until next time on Cold Case.